do you think that we are getting to a point where people do feel as though that progressive worldview of history is falling away, that people perhaps accept or recognize that we are in the winter of a civilization? And I suppose, probably more importantly, do you believe that we are?
Well, I mean, one of the things that interests me is that when you show people images of the 1950s of this country, or indeed in America, where you've got clean streets, or you've got these old communities with village greens, and they look impossibly idealized, to the point where you even have some leftists who deny it or claim it's constructed or in some way. Okay. But I mean, this is just video footage that was taken of the 1950s. Okay. Um, I mean, and then you go to your typical high street today with its endless vape shops and, people, people are from various different backgrounds milling about on the corner, and everybody looking at their mobile phone. And does it feel like that's progress? I mean, does anybody really believe that things are better off now than they were back then? So it was kind of, I think it was easier to sell this progressive vision of history if people felt that things were getting better, okay? Or if people felt that their lives were better than their parents' lives. But of course, anybody, I think, from millennials on down, millennials and the Zoomers, possibly even some of the younger Gen Xers as well. Well, that's just not been true. I was born in the early 80s, and I felt that I've lived my entire life under the shadow of the boomers, of their cultural achievements, of their kind of cultural ground zero in the 1960s. And, I was a teenager in the 90s, and the 90s was already a kind of homage to the 60s. Do you remember the Blur and Oasis and, but it was all nostalgia. It was all looking back. It was all like, oh, the Beatles again. Or if you look at the Blur, it was the Kinks again. But if you go back to the Beatles and the Kinks, even they were already nostalgic. Okay. Already trying to yes, there was the 60s cultural revolution, but there's also a sense of loss. Anybody listens to Sergeant Pepper or Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society, there's a sense of, they knew that they were living through something that was being lost. Okay, now in the 60s, there was cause to be optimistic about that. And possibly the last dying fumes of that were in the 1990s when we grew up. Now in 2025, what Blair was selling, and when I was 18, of this kind of optimistic vision of technology getting better and life getting better for everybody, is a much more difficult sell, I think, when people can't get on the housing ladder, when people can't get jobs, it's not that they can't get jobs, it's that they can't get the kind of professional class jobs that they feel that they're entitled to. And one of the bad legacies of Blair is what they call elite overproduction. That is the dragooning of millions of people into university who frankly shouldn't really be in university. And then they've done degrees that don't really lead naturally to a job. And then those ones who do jobs, they do their degree in, they could be English literature or history, or, they could be studying the classics or something. But what they actually end up doing is working for some massive multinational corporation, on a middling salary, doing marketing or internal communications or something, which, it's kind of, it's like, well, okay, this is the progress. This is what this is the promised land. And obviously, it's not just men, of course, but millions of women too have been sold this dream. And it's like, okay, it's framed as liberation. It's framed as progress. But, a very simple question to ask would be, well, there's something called the female happiness paradox. There's vast literature on this. As emancipation of women into the workplace has progressed, their happiness, as registered in various surveys and empirical studies, has progressively declined. Their mental health has progressively got worse. Anxiety is through the roof. Suicide rates have increased. Women are denied starting a family when they're young and now are forced to start families in their late 30s or even early 40s. And at some point, they sit down and they think, I was sold this liberal dream. I spent most of my formative years chained to a desk, writing emails for Microsoft. Was it all that? Was it better than the life that my grandparents had? Maybe, maybe not. But the fact it's even being questioned shows that it's not obvious. Whereas I feel like in the 90s, when we were teenagers, maybe it felt more obvious that it was kind of going onwards and upwards to most people. Now I think people are more pessimistic about that whole vision. And another problem is that our elites, the elite class, are so it's almost like a sunk cost. They're so far in on this that they have no answers whatsoever to any of these questions at all, except for more of it. Keir Starmer ran on a platform of growth, growth, growth. I saw Fraser Nelson, the editor of The Spectator, wrote an article the other day saying, "Oh, look, there's cause for celebration because Britain has added 5 million people to the population." I mean, okay, that may make sense if GDP is your only concern. Not that those 5 million people have necessarily led to economic growth, by the way. I saw another study showing that they've cost the country 35 billion people, 35 billion pounds, but that's another story. The point is that, okay, right now we're going to have a population of 70 million people, 75 million people, 80 million people. Again, that might be good for Microsoft, but is it better for the standard of living? Is it better for your happiness, for your life, for the country you want to lead? And I mean, I'm much more, you mentioned tech optimism or Anglo-futurism or something. I'm much more of the mind of like, well, wouldn't it actually be better if you just halve the population? Wouldn't be good for growth. It wouldn't be good for Microsoft, but it might be good for the prospect of you buying a house or living a fulfilling life or being part of a community. But these questions are put out of doors by our elites who just aren't concerned about that because their bottom line everywhere and always is economic.